Hello everybody, and welcome to Quora Top Stories. With us, you can hear the top real-time stories, put by a real person, wherever and whenever you like, and today we are here, with another amazing cop question. Hope you guys will like it. The question goes like, as a police officer, has someone you pulled over ever threatened to call Daddy? Ralph Socks, landlord, reserve deputy sheriff, says,
Oh yeah, and it was the sheriff's 18-year-old daughter. I pulled her over at 2 a.m. for running a red light. From my initial contact, based upon her language, attitude, and the odor of alcohol, I determined she was inebriated. I removed her to the rear of her vehicle. The entire time she was screaming that she was the sheriff's daughter. I knew that. The first step I conduct in my field sobriety tests is the HGN horizontal gaze nystagmus. That's where I wave my pen in front of your eyes, asking you to track the movement of my pen. It requires me to place my body in close proximity to the body of a detained individual. On this night, that was my mistake. She sucker punched me in the face. Broke my nose. Hard to believe a 120-pound female could punch like she did. She knocked me to the ground. I hit my dispatch panic button, and the world responded. The next I knew, she's cuffed and stuffed, and the paramedics are wanting to transport me. We finally all arrive at the jail, and my supervisors interviewed me again. They were more concerned about my health than anything. I kept asking for a status on the prisoner, and their only response was, "Who gives a? Let's get you taken care of." Then the sheriff arrived. He spoke with my supervisors, both of them, the lieutenant and the sergeant. He spoke with my fellow deputies who also responded. Then he spoke with his daughter confined in a holding cell. Then he approached me, and asked how I was. He really was concerned about my health, and the state of damage to my gear. We talked for several minutes. He apologized profusely for his daughter's behavior. I kept telling him it wasn't his fault. And then he said, and I'll never forget this is a direct order. You will charge this miscreant with underage consumption, operating while intoxicated, assault on an officer causing injury, and resisting arrest. You do that, and do it now, or I'll have your badge. And with that, he spun on his heels, and left without another word to anyone. The prosecutor reduced some of the charges, imagine that, but she ended up with time served, bail, for some unknown reason took 2 days, a large fine, and suspension of her driving license for 6 months. Additionally, the sheriff had her apologize in person, in front of the entire patrol division, 60 deputies, and I understand the entire corrections, jail, department, 100 officers.
Wow, that's a pretty good story, and with some good morals. Strict sheriff, I should say. But we need these kind, for sure. Now let's move ahead and find out what Paul Harding has to say. He is a deputy sheriff since 2000 and also a private pilot, instrument rated. And he says,
I once had Daddy show up at the scene of a DUI crash. Daddy tried to interfere with the field sobriety tests of his uninjured son. When I politely asked him to step away and let us get on with our business, Daddy ignored me. When I said it as an unequivocal order, he ignored me. When I told him I would place him under arrest in 5 seconds if he didn't back off, he reminded me that he was friends with my sheriff. I told him he would be free to call the sheriff from jail. Daddy pulled out his cell phone, and showed me that he had the sheriff's number stored in his contact list. I told him, I had it in my phone too, and that his 5 seconds were up. Go over there, and call the sheriff if you want, or go to jail. Your choice. I have work to do. Daddy walked away. Daddy's little boy got arrested, and lectured me all the way to the jail about how I would lose my job, because Daddy is friends with the sheriff. Daddy showed up at the sheriff's office the next day. Daddy was buddies with the sheriff, so he got unusual access to my reports, and crash scene diagrams right then and there on the sheriff's desk. He made his arguments about why I was wrong. I got called into the sheriff's office, later, to hear Daddy's objections from the sheriff himself. The sheriff asked me to respond. I did so. The sheriff said, "Good job. I've been friends with that guy for years, but he really is an asshole sometimes." Daddy's little boy, in his 20s, was convicted of DUI.
Seems like both Daddy and his little boy got the lesson. That's good to hear, Paul Harding. Thanks for teaching them. Moving ahead. If you have forgotten the question, which you might probably have, 'cause the story is quite long, don't worry. The question was, as a police officer, has someone you pulled over ever threatened to call Daddy? Robert Thibodeau, retired police sergeant, says,
I had several incidents like this, being on highway patrol. My response was always the same: I don't talk to anyone on the phone on the side of the highway. Sometimes, I could hear Mommy, or Daddy, or whoever trying to talk to me as the phone was held out. I would politely tell the driver, "Hang up the phone, or I'll hang it up for you." A few times, they would insist I take the phone. So I would, then hang up without saying a word. A couple of times, these bigwigs would try and call our station, and talk to the duty officer. I was always backed up by my superiors. The side of the highway, with cars zipping past, going 60+ miles per hour, only 3 to 4 feet away, is not a place to have a conversation about what Johnny or Susie did. If they had a problem, take the citation to court. Few ever did. One time, a friend of mine stopped a young lady for speeding. Using the e-citation computer, you scan a license and enter the violation and hit print. As the computer was processing the citation and printing it out, he noticed the address on the license. It was the governor's mansion in Annapolis. He had stopped, and not cited, the governor's daughter. We had fun, ribbing him, that the governor's wife, and the mother, was also a district judge and lawyer in her own right, and it was likely he would have to defend the citation in court. With her as the attorney. In front of her peers. But the citation ended up being paid, no court appearance. Just a call from the governor to our chief, telling him about the situation, which had already been briefed up by the chain of command, so the chief would not be blindsided if something was said. The governor then thanked the chief for having professional officers out there protecting citizens on the highway by enforcing the traffic laws, and to pass on his thanks to the officer for being professional in dealing with his daughter.
Short but sweet too. Good people throughout. This might not be the case for all. In some, people are given trouble though they have done a right thing. Hopefully this was not the case here. The governor acted very professionally in my view. Anyways, not wasting time on what my views are, let's move ahead to another story on someone calling their daddy to get out of police situations. Arthur Ferderber, married to a retired FBI SAC, says,
Sort of. My son and a buddy were stopped for driving a car without a license. It was literally a block from my house, so the cops called me. When I arrived, I realized the other kid was the son of our state's attorney general. The kid was telling the cops to back off, or he'd call his dad. Cop asked me who his dad was. I told them. At that point, the cop, who had been inclined to let the whole thing go, said, "Okay, let's call your dad, and see what he says." With that, he dressed the kid down big time, told him he was 100% sure his dad wouldn't be thrilled with his behavior, and even less thrilled that he tried to wiggle out of it by name-dropping him. Kid turned purple, asked them not to call his dad, apologized, and the cop let both kids off with a lecture and a stern warning. By the way, when I took the Attorney General's kid home and told him what happened, his response was, "Boys will be boys." Not much of a lesson learned for his kid. Mine learned something quite different. 20 years later, my kid works on Wall Street as an operations manager. The other kid has been in and out of rehab, and has trouble holding a job. His dad retired on a nice state pension, and now practices law in a cushy private practice.
Let's move to our last answer for today's question. David Nabris, police officer and training officer, 2001 present, says,
I had one call, Mummy, when I pulled him over and ran his license. He handed me the phone, smirked, and said, "She wants to talk to you." I took the phone, identified myself and said, "Your son has a warrant. And he's going to jail," and hung up the phone before she could say anything. And, since he was such a jerk, I had his little pickup truck towed, instead of letting someone come and get it. I usually release the vehicle to a friend or relation because towing costs them and it takes forever to get a tow truck out to the sticks. This time I waited. The sheriff wasn't very happy with me for some reason.
Oh. David left us little hanging with his story. I think Sheriff wasn't happy with him because Sheriff was told by the mother that what happened. Or maybe it didn't happen like that. Anyways, the good thing is, you did what was correct, and that's the main point. So this is it, guys, for today. I hope you loved some of these stories, put forward by different professionals. Kids especially think they can call their daddy and get out of problems easily. How did this mindset arrive in the first place? Weird thoughts. Hit like and subscribe for more of the amazing contents to come.